6 months into marriage, Akila learned that happily ever after was actually just happily ever after, followed by grocery shopping, school drop-offs, and the occasional realization that sharing a bathroom with Dong Hyun Kim meant accepting his inexplicable need for 17 different hair products. "You have more skincare than I do," she said one Tuesday morning, staring at the counter space that had slowly been colonized by bottles and jars with Korean labels she still couldn't fully read. Dong Hyun appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "My mother always said a man should take pride in his appearance. Your mother also threatened to have my family killed, so maybe we don't cite her wisdom first thing in the morning." He laughed against her neck, a sound that still made her stomach flip. Fair point, but the products stay. This was their life now. Ordinary moments punctuated by extraordinary reminders of how they'd gotten here. Akila would be helping Mina with homework, and suddenly remember that 3 years ago, she'd been convinced she'd never see this child again. Dong Hyun would come home late from a business meeting, and she'd have a flash of the old fear, wondering if tonight was the night everything collapsed. But it didn't collapse. Days turned into weeks, turned into months, and somehow the happiness held. Until February, when everything started to crack. It began with a phone call. Akila was at the kitchen table, reviewing translation documents for an immigration case, when her phone buzzed with an international number. Sudan calling code. Her heart stuttered. "Hello? Akila, it's Nayabal." Her sister's voice, tinny and distant across thousands of miles. "I need help." Nayabal never asked for help. She was a strong one, the one who'd stay behind when Akila had run, the one who'd raised 4 children while managing their mother's declining health and navigating the chaos of a country that couldn't decide if it was at war or peace. "What happened?" "It's Mama. She's sick. The doctor's here. They say it's her heart. But they don't have the equipment. Akila, she needs surgery. Real surgery. Not the kind they pretend to do here." Akila's throat tightened. She hadn't seen her mother in 4 years. Phone calls, video chats when the connection held, but not her actual face, not her hands, not the way she smelled like shea butter and would smoke. "How bad?" "Bad enough that I'm calling you at." Nayabal paused, probably calculating time zones. "Whatever time it is there. Bad enough that I'm asking." "What do you need?" "Money. A lot of it. To get her to Kenya. To a hospital that can actually help. To pay for the surgery, the recovery, everything." "How much?" When Nayabal named the figure, Akila's stomach dropped. It wasn't impossible, but it wasn't easy either. Her translation work paid decently, but she'd been independent for so long, refusing to let Dong Hyun's money change who she was. "I'll figure out," Akila said. "Give me a few days." "We don't have a few days." "Akila, she's dying." I wouldn't say that if it wasn't true. The word landed like a blow. Dying. Her mother, the woman who'd survived famine and displacement, and the kind of loss that would break most people, was dying. "I'll call you back tonight. Your time. I promise." She hung up, stared at her phone, and tried to remember how to breathe. Dong Hyun found her like that an hour later, still sitting at the kitchen table, her translation work untouched. "Hey!" He crouched beside her chair, concern creasing his features. "What's wrong?" Akila told him. All of it. The phone call, the money, the impossible math of saving someone you love from across an ocean. "Done." Dong Hyun said when she finished. "What do you mean done?" "I mean I'll transfer the money today. Whatever she needs." "Dong Hyun, I can't just take." "You're not taking. I'm giving. To my wife. For her mother." He took her hands, squeezing firmly. "We're family now. Your family is my family. Did you think I married you just for the excellent bathroom counter organization?" She laughed despite everything, a wet sound caught between tears and relief. "I need to go. To Kenya when they move her. I need to be there." "Then you'll go." "But Mina and your work and—" "Akila." He waited until she met his eyes. "Go. Be with your mother. We'll be fine here." She wanted to argue, to insist on complicated logistics and backup plans, but the truth was simpler. She needed to go, and Dong Hyun was letting her. 3 days later, Akila was on a plane to Nairobi, Her carry-on stuff with medical documents, translation apps, and a handwritten note from Mina that read, "Come back soon. I love you. Tell your mama hi from me." The hospital in Kenya was better than anything in South Sudan, but still overwhelming. Akila's mother, smaller than she remembered and gray-faced against white sheets, managed a weak smile when she walked in. "My traveler," she said in Dinka, their mother tongue. "You finally came home." "This isn't home, Mama. This is a hospital in Kenya. Home is where my children are. So this is home now." Akila stayed for 3 weeks. The surgery was successful, the recovery slow, but steady. Naya Ball came when she could, bringing the children for brief visits that left the hospital room chaotic and loud and perfect. "Your husband?" Naya Ball said one evening, when it was just the two of them watching their mother sleep. "He paid for everything. The flights, the hospital, the surgeon from Germany they brought in. He's generous. He's more than generous. He's good." Naya Ball studied her. "I was worried, when you told me about him. His business, the things his organization does. He's complicated. Most men are. But he loves you. I can tell from the way he calls every night, even when it's 4 a.m. his time." Naya Ball shook her head. "Don't mess this up, little sister. I'm trying not to." But trying not to mess things up was easier said than done, especially when Akila's phone rang on her last night in Nairobi with a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Kim." The voice was unfamiliar. Female, professional. "This is Sandra Chun, attorney at law. I represent your mother-in-law, Mrs. Kim Soon-Yi." Akila's stomach clenched. What does she want? Mrs. Kim wishes to discuss certain legal matters regarding her granddaughter, Mina. She's filed for visitation rights through the Virginia courts. She can't do that. Dong Hyun has sole custody. Mrs. Kim's position is that she has been unjustly denied access to her grandchild and that this separation is causing psychological harm. She's requesting court-order visitation as a starting point. A pause. "Mr. Kim has been served already. I'm calling you as a courtesy, since you're listed as Mina's legal stepmother." Legal stepmother. The words felt inadequate, clinical, nothing like what Mina was to her. "I'll be home tomorrow," Akila said, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. "Tell Mrs. Kim that if she wants to discuss this, she can do it face-to-face, not through lawyers." She hung up, immediately dialed Dong Hyun, and talked until the Nairobi sunrise painted her hotel room gold. The flight home felt endless. Akila ran through scenarios in her head, legal strategies she'd absorbed from years of immigration work, arguments she could make, evidence she could gather. By the time she landed at Dulles, she was exhausted and wired and ready for war. Dong Hyun met her at arrivals, his face tight with the same tension she felt. "Mina wasn't with him." "Where is she?" "With my sister. I didn't want her to see us like this." He took her bag, leading her toward the parking garage. "The hearing is in 2 weeks. My lawyer says it's mostly procedural. But my mother has connections, judges who owe her favors. So we count her, we document everything she did, the threats, the payoffs, the lies. My lawyer says that might backfire. Make it look like a mudslinging match instead of custody concern. Then what do we do?" Dong Hyun stopped walking, turned to face her in the middle of the garage. "I don't know. For the first time in my life, Akila, I don't know how to fight this." She'd never seen him look so lost. This was a man who negotiated with dangerous people for a living, who made decisions that moved millions of dollars and shaped lives. And his mother had managed to find the one battle he didn't know how to win. "Then we learn," Akila said firmly. "Together, we figured out." The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal consultations, sleepless nights, and carefully monitored conversations with Mina about what was happening. "Does grandmother want to see me?" Mina asked one evening, her small face serious. "Yes, baby, she does." "Do I have to?" Akila hesitated. The legal answer was different from the emotional answer. "We're trying to figure that out." "What do you want?" "I don't know." Mina pulled at a loose thread on her sweater. "I remember when grandmother was nice. Before you left. She used to bring me pretty clothes and tell me stories about Appa when he was little. She loves you, in her own way. But she was mean to you. She made you go away. Yes, she did. So, how can I love someone who was mean to someone I love? Out of the mouths of babes. Akila didn't have an answer. Not really. So she just pulled Mina close and held on. The court hearing arrived on a gray March morning. The kind of day that couldn't decide between rain and sun. Akila wore her most conservative dress. The one that said responsible adult instead of woman who once fled the country with $100,000 of hush money. Mrs. Kim was already there when they arrived. Seated at the opposite table with her lawyer, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit. She looked smaller than Akila remembered, somehow diminished despite her perfect posture and immaculate hanbok. The judge was a white woman in her 60s, Judge Patricia Morrison, with a reputation for being tough but fair. She listened as both lawyers made their arguments. Mrs. Kim's side emphasizing grandparents' rights and family stability. Dong Hyun's side laying out the history of manipulation and threats. I've reviewed the evidence submitted. Judge Morrison said finally, Mrs. Kim, while I'm sympathetic to your desire to maintain a relationship with your granddaughter, the documented behavior is concerning. You threatened Miss Mensa's family. You forged documents. You deliberately deceive your son to separate him from his partner. Mrs. Kim's expression didn't change, but her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. However, the judge continued, I also recognize that people can change, and that a child often benefits from relationships with extended family, even complicated ones. She paused, consulting her notes. I'm not granting the visitation petition as filed. Relief flooded through Akila, but it was short-lived. Instead, I'm ordering a family evaluation. A court-appointed therapist will meet with all parties, Mr. Kim, Mrs. Mensa Kim, Mrs. Kim, and young Mina, to determine what arrangement, if any, would be in the child's best interest. This is not a victory for either side. It's a pause. Use it wisely. The hearing adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Dong Hyun's hand found Akila's, squeezing hard. That could have been worse, he said quietly. It could have been better, too. We'll get through the evaluation. Show them with a stable choice. And your mother? She'll show them exactly who she is. She can't help it. But Akila wasn't so sure. Mrs. Kim had spent decades perfecting her masks. What made them think she couldn't fool one more person? The family evaluation began the following week. The therapist, Dr. Yolanda Washington, was a middle-aged black woman with natural hair and a warm but no-nonsense demeanor. She met with each of them separately first, then together in various combinations. Akila's individual session felt like walking through a minefield. Tell me about your relationship with Mina, Dr. Washington said, notepad balanced on her knee. She's my daughter, not biologically, but in every way that matters. I helped raise her for 2 years before I was forced to leave. I came back as soon as I could. Forced to leave. Can you elaborate? So Akila did. The threats, the money, the terror. Dr. Washington listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes. And how do you feel about Mrs. Kim now? I hate her. The words came out raw and honest. I hate what she did. I hate that she could walk into our lives and threaten everything we've built. But Akila hesitated. I also understand her. A little. She was protecting her family, the only way she knew how. It was wrong. It was cruel, but I understand the impulse. Could you ever forgive her? I don't know. Maybe. If she actually acknowledged what she did. If she apologized. Not the fake polite version, but really, truly meant it. And if she doesn't, then I'll spend the rest of my life protecting Mina from her. And I won't feel guilty about it. Dr. Washington nodded, made another note. Thank you for your honesty, Mrs. Mensa Kim. It's refreshing. The joint sessions were harder. Sitting in the same room as Mrs. Kim, watching her perform her version of maternal concern, made Akila's skin crawl. I only wanted what was best for my son, Mrs. Kim said during one session, her voice carefully modulated. I made mistakes. I know that now. What mistakes specifically? Dr. Washington pressed. I was too protective, too controlling. You threatened Miss Mensa's family. Mrs. Kim's composure flickered. I did what I thought was necessary. That's not an acknowledgement, Mrs. Kim. That's a justification. The room went quiet. Dong-hyun's hand found Akila's under the table. "I threatened her family," Mrs. Kim said finally. The words dragged out like confession. "I paid her to leave. I forged a letter to make my son believe she'd abandoned him willingly. I separated them for 3 years." She looked at Akila, and for the first time, something real flickered in her eyes. "I did terrible things. I told myself they were necessary, but they were terrible." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was closer than they'd ever gotten. Mina's session with Dr. Washington was private, parents not allowed. Akila spent the hour pacing the waiting room, while Dong-hyun answered emails on his phone, neither of them able to focus on anything else. When Mina emerged, she looked tired but not upset. Dr. Washington smiled at them reassuringly. "Mina is a very articulate young lady. You should be proud." "What did she say?" Akila asked. "That's confidential. But I will tell you she has strong opinions about her family. All of her family." Weeks passed. More sessions, more evaluations, more waiting. Akila tried to maintain normal routines. School drop-offs, translation work, family dinners. But the uncertainty hung over everything like a storm that wouldn't break. Then, one night in early April, Dong-hyun came home late from a business meeting with blood on his collar. Akila was still awake, grading translation exercises for a language tutoring service she'd started. She heard his key in the lock, heard his heavy footsteps, and knew immediately something was wrong. "What happened?" He didn't answer at first, just walked to the kitchen and poured himself a whiskey with shaking hands. "Dong-hyun, what happened?" Victor Petrov happened. He drained the glass, poured another. "He's making moves, testing boundaries. Thinks I've gone soft since the wedding." Victor Petrov. Akila knew the name, a Russian competitor who'd been circling Dong-hyun's organization for years. She'd hoped marriage and stability would make that world feel further away, but apparently hope was enough. "Are you hurt?" "This isn't my blood." He finally looked at her, his eyes dark and complicated. "I handled it, but he'll try again. People like Victor, they don't stop until they're stopped." "What does that mean?" "It means I might have to do things. Things you won't like. Things that remind you why my mother wanted you gone in the first place." Akila crossed him, took the whiskey glass from his hand, and set it aside. "I knew who you were when I married you. I know what you do. That hasn't changed. But you don't see it. Not really. I've kept you separate from that world on purpose." "Then don't separate me anymore." She held his gaze, refusing to flinch. "I'm your partner. In everything. If there's danger coming, I need to know." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Victor wants to expand into our territory. The shipping lanes, the distribution networks, everything my father built. He's been buying off some of my people, turning them. Can you stop him?" "Yes, but it won't be clean." "Is it ever?" "No." He reached for her, pulling her close. "I don't want this touching Mina. Or you. Then we make sure it doesn't." They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, while Akila processed what this meant. She'd married into a complicated world, eyes open, but knowing something abstractly and living it were different beasts entirely. The next morning, she called Jiwoo. They met at the same Georgetown coffee shop, same corner table. Jiwoo looked different from before, softer somehow, less polished. She'd been traveling, she explained, taking time to figure out what she actually wanted instead of what was expected of her. "You look concerned," Jiwoo observed, stirring her tea. "What's wrong?" Akila told her. The court case, Mrs. Kim's petition, Victor Petrov's moves against Dong-hyun. She wasn't sure why she was confiding in this woman who'd almost married her husband, except that Jiwoo understood this world in ways outsiders couldn't. "Victor is dangerous," Jiwoo said when Akila finished. "My family has dealt with him before. He doesn't negotiate. He dominates or he destroys. So what do we do?" "We?" "I'm not sure there's a we anymore. I walked away from that life, remember? But you still have connections. Information." Jiwoo's eyes narrowed. "You're asking me to help your husband, the man I was supposed to marry, fight off a Russian crime lord. I'm asking you to help me protect my family." Something shifted in Jiwoo's expression. Maybe respect, maybe recognition. "What do you need?" Intelligence. Anything you know about Victor's operations, his weaknesses, who he's bought off. Dong-hyun has his own sources, but you move in different circles. And in exchange, Akila hadn't thought that far. What do you want? Nothing material. Ji-woo set down her tea. But maybe friendship? I don't have many female friends. Women in my position rarely do. Everyone is always calculating, positioning. You're the first person in years who's asked me for help without treating it like a transaction. It is a transaction. You help me, I owe you. See, that's the thing. I don't want you to owe me. I want you to trust me. Ji-woo smiled, a little sadly. I've spent my whole life being useful, being strategic. I'd like to try being genuine instead. Akila understood that more than she wanted to admit. Okay, friends, who occasionally exchange information about criminal enterprises. The best kind of friends. The information Ji-woo provided was invaluable. Names of Victor's lieutenants, shipping routes he was eyeing, weak points in his organization. Dong-hyun used it strategically, shoring up his defenses, turning Victor's turned men back or neutralizing them entirely. Your new friend is impressive, Dong-hyun said one evening, reviewing the latest intelligence. I underestimated her. Most people do. That's her advantage. Remind me never to underestimate the women in my life. As if you could forget. The conflict with Victor escalated over the next month, then abruptly ended when Victor himself was arrested by federal authorities on unrelated charges. Money laundering, weapons trafficking, things that had nothing to do with Dong-hyun, but conveniently removed him from the board. Did you do that? Akila asked. I may have facilitated certain information reaching certain agencies. That's dangerous. Making enemies of federal authorities by bringing them into your world. They were already in my world. I just pointed them at a bigger target. Dong-hyun shrugged. Sometimes the enemy of my enemy is a useful tool. Akila didn't ask for more details. Some things were better not knowing. With Victor handled, they could focus on the family evaluation. Dr. Washington's final session was scheduled for late April, with her recommendation going to Judge Morrison shortly after. The night before the session, Mrs. Kim called Dong-hyun directly. Akila watched him take the call, his expression shifting from suspicion to confusion to something she couldn't read. When he hung up, he sat in silence for a long moment. She wants to meet. Tomorrow morning, before the session. Just her and me. That's a bad idea. Probably. But she said she has something to tell me. Something important. It's a manipulation. Also probably. He looked at her, but she's still my mother, and if there's any chance. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Go, Akila said quietly. But be careful. Dong-hyun met Mrs. Kim at her condo early the next morning. Akila stayed home, anxiety making her pace the living room while Mina got ready for school. He was gone for 2 hours. When he returned, his face was pale. What happened? She showed me something. He handed her his phone, a photo loaded on the screen. Medical documents, Korean writing mixed with English. She's sick, cancer, stage 3. She found out a month ago. Akila stared at the image, trying to process. And you believe her? I verified it with her doctor. It's real. That doesn't change what she did. No, but it changes what happens next. Dong-hyun sat heavily on the couch. She's not fighting for visitation because she wants to control us. She's fighting because she's dying, and she wants to know her granddaughter before she runs out of time. The revelation sat between them, heavy and complicated. Akila wanted to feel vindicated, triumphant even, but all she felt was tired. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me says let her suffer the consequences of her choices. Let her die without the family she destroyed. His voice cracked. But she's my mother. She's Mina's grandmother. And no matter what she's done, I can't just. You can't stop loving her. No, I can't. Akila sat beside him, taking his hand. Then we figure out how to make this work. Not for her sake. For yours. For Mina's. Dr. Washington's final session that afternoon took on a different weight. Mrs. Kim was there, looking thinner than before, the illness apparently more visible now that they knew to look for it. I understand there's been a development. Dr. Washington said carefully. Mrs. Kim, would you like to share? Mrs. Kim straightened in her chair, that familiar pride warring with something more vulnerable. I am ill. I may not survive the year. I do not share this for sympathy. I share it because it is relevant to why I am here. Go on. I spent my life building things. My husband's organization, my son's future, my family's legacy. I still believe, that some things require sacrifice, hard choices. But I made those choices without asking people they affected. She looked at Dong-hyun, then at Akila. I took your choices away. I told myself it was protection, but it was control. And I am sorry. The words seemed to cost her physically, her shoulders tensing like she was bracing for a blow. I am sorry I threatened your family. Akila, I am sorry I lied to my son. I am sorry I hurt my granddaughter. Mrs. Kim's voice wavered. I am not asking for forgiveness. I know I have not earned it, but I am asking for time. Whatever time I have left, to know Mina, to try to repair what I broke. Silence stretched across the room. Dr. Washington watched them all, making notes. Mrs. Mensa Kim, she said finally, what are your thoughts? Akila took a breath, choosing her words carefully. I don't trust her. I may never trust her. But she looked at Mina, who was watching the adults with those serious eyes that saw too much. My daughter deserves to make her own choices about this relationship, with supervision, with boundaries, but not with us standing in the way. Dr. Washington nodded, turning to Mina. And what do you think, sweetheart? Do you want to spend time with your grandmother? Mina was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up, walked across the room, and took Mrs. Kim's hand. I don't like what you did, Mina said, her small voice firm. You hurt my mom and my appa, and you were mean. But I don't want you to be sick alone. That's not nice either. Mrs. Kim's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she pulled her granddaughter into a careful embrace. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, thank you. The evaluation concluded with Dr. Washington recommending supervised visitation, starting gradually and expanding if all parties showed good faith. Judge Morrison approved the arrangement, noting that it was unusual but reflected the complex family dynamics at play. Mrs. Kim's first official visit was a Sunday afternoon at a neutral location, a park near the Potomac, where Mina could play while the adults maintained awkward conversation. Akila watched from a bench as Mrs. Kim pushed Mina on a swing, her movements careful, conserving energy she no longer had in abundance. Dong-hyun sat beside Akila, their shoulders touching. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, he admitted. Me too. Does it ever get easier? Waiting for disaster? I'll let you know when I figure it out. They watched Mina laugh, watched Mrs. Kim smile, watched something tentative and fragile try to grow in the space between old wounds. Maybe it wouldn't work. Maybe Mrs. Kim would revert to manipulation. Maybe trust was impossible after everything. But maybe, probably, they had to try anyway. Summer arrived hot and humid, the kind of Virginia heat that made everything slower and stickier. Akila's translation business expanded, taking on more immigration cases, helping more families navigate the nightmare of bureaucracy and fear. Dong-hyun's organization stabilized after the Victor situation, though there were always new challenges, new threats to manage. Mrs. Kim's condition worsened, then stabilized, then worsened again. She started chemotherapy in June, losing her hair and her appetite, but not her stubbornness. Mina visited twice a week now, unsupervised after the first few months, coming home with stories about Korean, recipes grandmother was teaching her, and old photographs from when Apple was small. Grandmother says Apple was a troublemaker. Mina reported one evening, giggling. She has pictures of him with no pants at a fancy party. Dong-hyun groaned. I was 3. Still funny. There were setbacks, days when old resentments surfaced, and Akila couldn't look at Mrs. Kim without remembering. Days when Mrs. Kim's control slipped and she made comments that needed to be addressed. Days when Dong-hyun got caught between two women he loved who couldn't quite find peace with each other. But they kept trying. That was the thing about family. You didn't get to choose the easy version. In September, Akila received an unexpected visitor. She was working from home when the doorbell rang. Opening it, she found a young woman on the step maybe early 20s, with features that tug at something familiar. Mrs. Mensa Kim? The woman's English was accented, British mixed with Korean. My name is Hannah Kim. I'm Dong Hyun's daughter. Akila blinked. I'm sorry. His other daughter. From before he met you. Before he met anyone, really. I was a surprise. One his family has spent my entire life hiding. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. But the woman's eyes. She had Dong Hyun's eyes. You should come in, Akila said, stepping aside. I think we need to talk. Hannah's story unfolded over tea, halting at first, then faster as the words built momentum. My mother was a waitress in Seoul. She and Dong Hyun had a brief relationship when he was in university. I was a result. Hannah's hands wrapped around her mug, seeking warmth. When Mrs. Kim found out, she paid my mother to disappear. Same playbook, different woman. But you knew who your father was. Eventually, my mother told me before she died, 2 years ago, she gave me documents, proof, but I didn't know what to do with it until I saw the news about grandmother's court case here. All those articles about family secrets and hidden pasts. Hannah looked up, her expression a mix of hope and fear. I thought maybe things were changing. Maybe there was room for one more secret to come out. Akila's mind raced. If this was true, and those eyes, that bone structure, it had to be true, then Dong Hyun had a grown daughter he didn't know about. Mina had a sister. Mrs. Kim had been running this particular scam for longer than anyone realized. Does Dong Hyun know you're here? No. I was going to approach him first, but I lost my nerve. You seemed safer, like someone who might understand what it's like to be pushed out of this family. Pushed out isn't gone, Akila said slowly. I came back. And maybe I can come in? Before Akila could answer, the front door opened. Dong Hyun walked in, jacket over his arm, then stopped short when he saw their visitor. Akila? Who is... He trailed off. She watched realization dawn across his face, saw him see himself in the stranger's features. Hello, Hannah said quietly. I'm Hannah. I think I'm your daughter. The next few hours were chaos. Dong Hyun demanded explanations, then demanded to see proof, then sat in stunned silence as Hannah provided both. Documents, photographs, DNA test results she'd already run against a discarded coffee cup from his office visit last month. I'm sorry for the deception, Hannah said. I needed to be sure before I approached you. 23 years, Dong Hyun muttered. My mother hid this for 23 years. She's good at hiding things. Don't I know it? They confronted Mrs. Kim together, Dong Hyun, Akila, and Hannah, arriving at the hospital room where she'd been admitted for another round of treatment. She looked small in the bed, tubes and monitors, making her seem fragile in a way she never had before. So, Mrs. Kim said when she saw them, her eyes found Hannah, and something like resignation crossed her face. You found her, or she found you. You paid off her mother, Dong Hyun said, his voice dangerously calm. The same way you paid off Akila. How many other women have you erased? Just 2. Just the ones who threatened our family. They were family. Hannah is my daughter. She was a complication. You were young, directionless. You needed to focus on the business, not on raising some waitress's child. That wasn't your choice to make. All my choices were for you. Mrs. Kim's voice cracked. Everything I did, every terrible thing, was to protect you, to build something you could be proud of. I know you hate me. You should hate me. But I did it for love. That's not love. That's control. Sometimes they look the same. The room went quiet, except for the beep of monitors. Akila watched Dong Hyun struggle with emotions too big for words. Watched Hannah hold herself rigidly. Watched Mrs. Kim face consequences she'd spent decades avoiding. I want to know my father, Hannah said finally, and my sister, if they'll have me. You're my daughter, Dong Hyun replied. You'll always have me. He crossed to her, pulling her into an embrace that had been waiting 23 years. Akila felt tears prick her eyes, not just for this reunion, but for the complexity of family, the way it could wound and heal in the same breath. Mrs. Kim watched from her hospital bed, tears on her own cheeks. I'm sorry, Hannah, for what I took from you. Are you? Hannah's voice was hard. Or are you just sorry you got caught? Both. Does that matter? I don't know yet. Ask me again when you're gone. Harsh, but honest. Mrs. Kim nodded slowly, accepting. They left the hospital as a strange, expanded family. Dong Hyun with his arm around Hannah, Akila walking beside them, trying to figure out how this changed everything and nothing all at once. So, I have another sister? Mina asked that evening, after they'd attempted to explain. Is she nice? She's nice, Akila confirmed. And she's going to stay with us for a while, until we figure things out. Good. I always want a sister. Mina paused. Does this mean grandmother has to buy more Christmas presents? Leave it to a child to find the practical concerns. Hannah settled into their lives over the following weeks, finding her own room in the estate, joining family dinners, slowly building relationships that had been denied her entire life. She and Mina bonded over shared eye rolls at their father's jokes. She and Akila bonded over being women Mrs. Kim had tried to erase. How do you forgive her? Hannah asked one night, when they were both awake late and sharing tea in the kitchen. After everything she did to you, I haven't forgiven her. Not completely. Akila stared into her cup. But I'm learning to live with the anger instead of letting it consume me. That feels like progress. You think she's really sorry? Or just sorry she's dying before she can fix things? Does it matter? Sorry is sorry. What you do with it is the real test. She's trying. I can see that. But it feels like too little too late. It probably is. And you get to feel however you feel about that. Akila reached over, squeezed Hannah's hand. But you also get to build something new. A family that actually sees you. That's not nothing. No, Hannah agreed quietly. That's not nothing. Mrs. Kim died in November, surrounded by more family than she probably deserved. Dong Hyun and his sister were there, Mina and Hannah, even Akila, watching the monitors slow and stop as a complicated woman took her last breath. The funeral was traditional Korean, elaborate and formal, full of people Akila didn't know, making speeches about Mrs. Kim's legacy. Strength, determination, family loyalty, all the things that sounded noble when you didn't know the full story. At the reception afterward, Ji-woo appeared. She'd heard the news, wanted to pay respects. She was a remarkable woman, Ji-woo said, standing beside Akila near the buffet table. Terrible in many ways, but remarkable. Can someone be both? Most people are. The question is which quality you remember. Akila considered this. I think I'll remember her as a cautionary tale. What happens when love becomes control? A useful lesson. The most useful ones usually are. They stood in companionable silence, watching mourners mingle, watching the complicated legacy of Mrs. Kim Suni unfold in conversations and condolences. What will you do now? Ji-woo asked. Keep living. Raise Mina. Get to know Hannah. Support Dong Hyun as he inherits everything his mother built. Akila smiled, a little tired but genuine. Try to do better than she did. I think you already have. In the months that followed, life settled into new patterns. Dong Hyun took over his mother's position in the organization fully, making changes, modernizing operations, trying to edge toward legitimate business, while managing the complicated relationships that kept everything running. Hannah got a job at a tech startup in D.C., started dating a woman from her yoga class, became the cool older sister who took Mina for ice cream and taught her Korean pop songs. Akila's translation business expanded into advocacy, working with immigration lawyers and human rights organizations, using her skills for something bigger than survival. And Mina grew, started second grade, made friends, asked questions about her grandmother that got more complicated as she got older. They answered honestly, age-appropriately, let her form her own understanding of the woman who'd love her and harmed her in equal measure. On the anniversary of Mrs. Kim's death, they visited her grave as a family. Dong Hyun laid flowers, spoke quietly in Korean. Mina drew a picture to leave. Hannah stood back, still processing her relationship with a woman who'd stolen her chance at a father. Akila watched them all, these people who become her family through circumstance and choice, and felt something settle in her chest. You okay? Dong Hyun asked, coming to stand beside her. I'm thinking about your mother, about how she spent her whole life controlling everyone around her, and in the end, she couldn't control anything. That's bleak. It's honest, but also, Akila turned to face him. I'm thinking about what we do differently, how we let our kids make their own choices, even when it's hard, how we trust each other even when it's scary. We're not perfect. No, but we're trying to be better. That has to count for something. Dong-hyun pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. It counts for everything. They walked back to the car as a family. Imperfect, complicated, bound together by love and loss and the stubborn decision to keep showing up for each other. Because that was the thing about second chances. They didn't erase the first version. They didn't fix everything that was broken. They just gave you another opportunity to try. And trying, Akila had learned, was the most any of us could do. So that wraps up part 2 of Dong-hyun and Akila's story. Thanks for sticking around for all the twists and drama and complicated family feelings. If you're still invested in these characters, hit that like button and let me know in the comments whether you think Mrs. Kim's deathbed regrets were genuine or just one final manipulation. I'm curious what you think. And if you want to see part 3, maybe Mina as a teenager navigating her messy family legacy, drop a comment saying so. Subscribe so you don't miss it when it drops. See you in the next one.